Hi, this is Cheri Keaggy, and you're listening to 20th Century Classics with Tom Taylor. Tom Taylor, Cheri Keaggy.
How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm good.
Yeah, so can you tell us where you grew up and about your early life?
Yes, I grew up in Southern California. I was born and raised there. And actually, my family still lives out there, or my parents and my sister, I should say. And my folks live in Orange County, is kind of where I grew up, that area. But I started going to church as a young girl. My mom brought my sister and I to church. It was a Lutheran church, so that was my first early childhood church experience. But I took piano lessons from age 7. I started and had a really gifted teacher from Argentina with a real thick accent, and she had a conservatory of music. I took years and years of lessons from her. So I have a classical piano background, and so piano was sort of the thing that I was good at as a kid growing up. Every kid has sort of their thing. You're either sort of music and theater or sports or academia, whatever. I was always a fairly good student, but music was sort of the thing that I loved. And so that was a big part of my growing up, performing recitals. And in a talent show at school, usually people would, if they were singing a solo, they might ask me to accompany them, And so I was the accompanist also for my junior high choir and the high school choir. And I would play church offertories, that sort of thing. So I didn't know at the time, though, that that I would later go on to record records, that those piano lessons would really pay off,
Yeah. So what kind of music did you actually listen to growing up?
Well, just, kind of what was on the radio, I guess, top 40 radio. And my dad plays the accordion. My dad is 77. Yeah, my dad's 77. He plays the accordion, and so I grew up listening to him play, and then also just some of the albums that he would listen to were, what I would hear in the home, which was a variety of things. But my first introduction to Christian music probably really was, my first Christian album was Amy Grant's Age to Age.
Oh, that's a great one, yeah.
Yes, and I can still picture the cover,
Yeah.
And I'm sort of an alto range singer, and so I could, Amy is kind of a similar vocal range as I, but yeah, some of my other early Christian albums, I remember having Kathy Tricoli's Stubborn Love, and I mean, I'm talking albums. These were albums,
LPs, yeah.
Vinyl, and I'm trying to think. I had Steve Taylor Meltdown, and had Michael W. Smith, the one with the Argyle sweater, the like neon lights or whatever, and then of course, Phil Keaggy's albums, which I learned about his music as a teenager, just growing in my relationship with the Lord. So those are a few that come to mind, but just a lot of top 40.
And can you share your testimony with us? How did you come to accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior?
Yeah, and isn't that just the core of it? It's the reason I even have something to sing about. Well, as I stated, I kind of went to church as a child and always had a childlike respect for God. I don't remember a time where I didn't believe in God. So I always had that from the earliest I can remember. But it really was my freshman year in high school that I mark as the time where I, understood that he wanted a relationship with me. That it wasn't just something that you learned about on Sunday, and that I started reading my Bible, during the week at home by myself and stuff, or going to Bible studies and that sort of thing. So I always have described my conversion experience as crock-pot Christianity. I don't know why that comes to mind. Just because it was like the Lord gradually warming my heart to more of Him. You know?
Yeah.
And in different hard times in life. So, of course, those are the times where you really press in more. So I don't have a date that I can say, yes, it was 19 such and such, that was the day I received or accepted Christ, or it was more of a gradual thing. And, part of my story, I'm sure we'll get into it as we go, is, having been married before and having gone through a divorce and so that's a part of my testimony too,
Yeah, of course,
and certainly through those hardships, clinging to the Lord and learning of Him and learning that there is something in the Word for every situation, some wisdom, some comfort, some challenge, some conviction, some, just the truth that is life and breath to us as believers. So that's a big part of my journey with the Lord. I had went through classes at my church to learn about, the sacraments, classes to learn about communion, what it means. And then also went through confirmation, which is just sort of a rite of passage in the Lutheran denomination, And so I had a really good foundation, and it became more personal as I went along. I remember being baptized with the early, I would say probably I was a preteen age, maybe 11 or 12, and being baptized and sprinkled, on the head, and still have the little, they gave me a little white linen cloth that had a cross embroidered in it, and I still have that to this day. But then years later, having, after I recorded records, having the opportunity to go to Israel and be baptized again in the Jordan River,
wow.
Full submersion, the whole thing.
Wow.
And of course, I understood it. I understood it to some degree the first time, but how much more meaningful it was the second time, as I had grown so much in my walk with the Lord and my dependency on Him, and understood the magnitude of the bigness of His grace and mercy towards me, what He had done for me. So anyway, I can just keep talking, but next question.
Oh, that's no problem at all. Well, so how and when did you begin writing your own songs?
Well, I had written some piano instrumentals, just, kind of in high school, and along with the classical music, and really my first song that later went on an album was a worship song called "You, O Lord, Are My Refuge."
Oh, yeah.
And that was recorded on Child of the Father, my debut album from '94. But it was a song I had written for the church that I was then a worship leader for, back at a church in California, that it was an evangelical free church. We were a church plant from Chuck Swindoll's church. And so I was helping with the music ministry, first just playing the piano and that sort of thing, and then eventually they brought me on as a part-time staff member, and my title was worship coordinator. And in that setting, I really grew in my musical giftings, and my husband at the time had nudged me one day. He saw me, every week I would go down to the church and I would plan the week's service, put the music together and prepare for a rehearsal with the worship team and all of that. And he was like, "Why don't you write your own? Why don't you try writing?" And so, okay, that's a thought. So I learned the pastor would be preaching from Psalm 91 that Sunday, and I turned to that passage, and fairly quickly and fairly easily that song just was born.
Wow. And
so I worked it out, and then I taught it to the band, and we introduced it to church on that following Sunday, and it became one of our staple songs, like in regular rotation,
That's cool.
And I introduced it to the team, but I didn't tell them that I had written it. It was just like, okay, and I did that for the first, I don't know, however long, because I continue to write these corporate songs that work in that a corporate worship setting, and eventually they sort of caught on. But anyway, those are sort of my early offerings before the Lord, and it was a beautiful time of discovery because I don't have, although I had the classical training and all of that, and I've always loved to write. I mean, English language arts being one of my stronger subjects, I love words. I don't have a degree in music or, that sort of thing. So it was somewhat amazing to me, like how easily these songs were coming, and I was like, wow, this really must be when God talks about how He gifts. He gives gifts, and He equips the ill-equipped, and He equips us for whatever it is we're called to do. I was experiencing that, and just in a bit of awe myself, but enjoying being able to express the things of my faith through music in a way that connected with people.
Yeah, and I can imagine that from that point, the songs kind of just flowed freely from that point.
Yes, and then it was a real, I don't know if the word is prolific or it was a real fruitful time.
Yeah.
And then those early songs actually then became a lot of the songs that went on my first album.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So what events led to signing with Sparrow Records and recording that first album?
Yes. My husband at the time had recorded, we did like a little demo, kind of a demo of my very first 10 songs. And we used it at our church at the time, had a lunch ministry, like a weekly lunch ministry to the homeless. And so we used that. We sold the little tapes at church, cassette tapes. And we used that money to fund that leg of the ministry to buy the groceries and what they needed for the lunches. And then, but then the people started sending the tapes to their missionary friends in Japan or whatever, sending them around, and the thing started to sort of grow, and then there was interest from Maranatha Music. And my husband at the time was mixing sound for some of those events, the crusades and things, evangelical crusades. And so he had a relationship with some of them, and it brought my tape to them, and they were wanting to record the songs right away. Same thing with Vineyard Ministries, Maranatha and Vineyard, and it seems to me there was another one, Integrity Music. Where they were releasing all these worship series at the time. It was sort of exploding at the time, and they wanted the songs. At the same time, we had a family friend, who was one of the executives at Sparrow Records, and so he sent the tape to them. Oh, I know what it was. He was mixing sound for a Charlie Peacock concert at Biola University out in California, and so I would often go to these sound checks. I would tag along as he would mix sound for these events. And so Charlie had done his sound check. He had left the stage, and I was still. They hadn't opened the doors yet for the evening, and so I picked up the piano and played a song. And I had written. I think I played the song "Child of the Father." I had written that by then. Yeah, and so Charlie, I guess the story is that Charlie heard the music, and that called him sort of back in the auditorium, and he was standing back at the soundboard and asking about me. And then when the song was over, I looked up and saw that he had come back in, and then I was somewhat intimidated, And but he's like, "Play me another one." So then I played a song called "The Little Boy on His Knees," which also was on that first album that I'd written for my son, who's now 27, my son.
Yeah.
But anyway, so there he was all excited, and he said, "Will you come have dinner with me?" And so we had dinner with Charlie Peacock that night, and we wanted, he was wanting to talk with us, and he says, well, I think we had already sent the tape on to this Sparrow executive, Peter York, and so we were telling him that, and telling him the interest that we had from some of these worship labels, interest in the songs, and he's like, "Oh, I'm so excited! He was producing a lot of the Sparrow artists at the time.
Yeah.
Margaret Becker, Out of the Gray, some of those the artists that I loved and was listening to at the time.
Yeah.
And so he's like, "Oh, I'm so excited! I can't wait to call Peter. I'll put the good word in for you," kind of thing. So that was encouraging. But we're thinking, "Oh yeah, sure you will," But
Yeah.
he did. He called Peter, and I think while he was still on the road, and he called and he said, "Peter, the story is, Peter, I've got 2 words for you, Cheri Keaggy." So, and then Peter was excited. "What? Did you meet her? Did you see her?" So that was certainly helped, because then he had Charlie excited about it, and he ended up producing my first 2 albums.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so that was a really kind of a neat story, and we came to Nashville and met everyone at the label and ended up, signing a record deal, and so we were flying back and forth from California to Nashville to work on the record.
Oh, wow. And so when did you finally end up relocating there? It must have been shortly thereafter.
Yeah, really, after recording that first album, we ended up moving, and we had 2 small children at the time. They were like 2 and 4-ish. I did my first tour with Phillips, Craig, and Dean, and a sort of country Christian artist at the time by the name of Brian Barrett. I'm not sure if he's still recording. But anyway, that was our first tour, and the kids were little. We took them on the road with us. And, and somewhere in there, we, I felt the tug on, when I had to come here to record and leave the kids back home with Grandma, it was an exciting time, but it also tugged on my mother heart, because I was like, I was a mother first before this all happened,
Yeah.
So it really made sense for us to move, with the label being here and the booking agent and the management, all that. So I've been a Nashville girl for many, many years now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so you had mentioned your divorce a little bit ago. And you were married to your high school sweetheart for about 22 years?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's my story. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, would you talk about the personal healing you had to go through following that divorce, and how you've been able to minister to others going through similar circumstances?
Yes, we don't always get to choose our form of brokenness, but we all have it. We all have it to some degree. I like to say same mess, different details, and I never thought I'd be in the club, but God, yes, has done so much healing and since then, and many, many songs poured out. Many, many songs were also a part of sort of my healing, and very therapeutic for me. Songs of brokenness, but also songs of comfort. And God has used that. He does not waste our sorrows, and I experienced that a lot of years of struggle, a lot of years of pain and hurt, disappointment, all of that. I was, when hard things come, it's like people react one of 2 ways. Either they run from God, in anger, bitterness, resentment, all that, or they cling to Him for dear life.
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of what I did, and He walked me through the work of forgiveness and all of that. And, it wasn't easy, but it was, just, choosing to do that work, cooperating with the Holy Spirit,
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful for all God has done, even in the midst of the brokenness. He has shown me that He's bigger. He is bigger than the worst thing you can ever imagine happening. He's bigger than your biggest fear, whatever that is. Insert it. He's bigger than that. And if that thing happens, well, you know what? You'll find out that He is there, and He is truly all the things that you've said you believe for all of these years, you discover they're really true. He is our solid foundation, you know.
Yeah.
His love is constant. And so appreciate you asking. So I recorded an album in 2012 called So I Can Tell.
Yeah.
That really was, that album so ministers to those experiencing losses of many different kinds. And I think it's First Peter talks about griefs of many kinds. And so those who, maybe it's divorce, maybe it's death of a loved one, you know, loss of a dream or a job or whatever. And those songs are very comforting to that person in that season.
Can you talk about your latest album, No Longer My Own?
Yes. No Longer My Own was released in 2015.
Yeah.
And that, the title cut, I love the title because it says so much, because it is a song about surrender, but it was inspired through a poem that I had read. Really, it's called The Covenant Prayer, and I'd read it in a book or something, and it's often attributed to John Wesley, founder of the Methodist Church, but anyway, it's this prayer. You could Google it and you'd find it everywhere, but it's just such a prayer of surrender. And I remember writing it in my journal. I'm a lifelong journaler, and writing it in my journal, and my notation, when I feel that there's a song idea brewing, a lot of times I'll put like a little eighth note. I'll draw a little eighth note in my journal. If there's like a little lyric idea or something, then I can reference back. But I remember doing a little eighth note, like, I'd love to put this to music in some way. And so that's the title cut, No Longer My Own. But I think, you know, in the 2012 release, I was really just, you know, reeling from my circumstances that had been very difficult for a very long time, and God allowed me to exhale and pour out these songs, pour out my heart, and He met me there at the piano in such a beautiful way. But then, you know, you become further removed from that time, and you're maybe perhaps less self-focused and more, your perspective becomes broader, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think, like, No Longer My Own, the album as a whole, has a broader focus. You know, I touch on the persecuted church. I, you know, touch on, there's a song on there called Be My Sabbath, the importance of Sabbath rest. And I think the themes are broader somehow.
Yeah. And you actually self-produced this album, right? Is that correct?
Well, yes, you could say. You know, I think the key there is hiring great players. You know,
Yeah.
and if you hire great players that you have a track record, you know, have a relationship with or history with, you know, you're going to get great stuff. So it's just a matter of sort of managing and steering that thing. But really, I'm so grateful because both those albums that we're talking about, God provided through a crowdfunding campaign.
Oh yeah.
I used Kickstarter, so even that was miraculous. To see God provide. You know, I have been, and you can get this because you're a musician also. I was on a major label back in the day, and lots of radio singles and number ones and all this. It's so much has changed in the industry. Many in my shoes are, you know, independent artists, you know, as we're called. But it was so beautiful for me, as a newly single person, to see God truly provide. He was Jehovah Jireh. The Lord provided for these albums. He was, in a sense, in a time when I wasn't sure, would God still use me post-divorce? What did He have for me? You know, could I still write a good song or whatever? I feel like in some ways I've written some of the best stuff of my life, you know, post-divorce, because it's coming from such a deep place. You know, people appreciate that authenticity. But I don't know, that wasn't even what you asked, but I felt compelled to share.
Yeah. Yeah, you were actually one of my inspirations to launching my first crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter.
Really?
Yeah,
that's wonderful.
Yeah, I saw your campaign, and so I gave it a shot, and I remember a point where I was getting really discouraged because it just didn't seem like it was going to make it. And at that point, I remember just having to turn it all over to God and then just kind of just contact everyone I could, and the Lord met the need, and and it was just a real test of faith, and it was a good journey for me.
Yes, I actually have been able to encourage other artists who are in the middle of a campaign and panicking, you know, and the same thing that happened to you. I was seeing other artists and how they have had success, so it was something, wow, big leap of faith. But I wrote a blog, and I think it's called Prayer versus Panic, a Kickstarter Strategy, or something like that, you know? Because you're sort of back and forth between belief, you know? So much of our struggle is, will we believe or not, you know? But between prayer and panic and on your knees and all that, it's been an exciting journey. And then I think then your fans, your followers have a personal, those supporters have such a personal connection because they know that they've been instrumental in seeing the music come to fruition. And but Bob, I'll tell you though, wearing all those hats, I mean, that's part of where the song Be My Sabbath that I mentioned was born out of, just wearing so many hats as an independent artist and just doing the work of the Lord. There's a difference between doing the work that God has called you to do, being efficient, diligent, productive, you know, a good steward of your time and resources, all of that. We all want that. And we all want to be used in the kingdom that way, but God set out parameters for us to work rightly, you know? And I think I was just burning it at both ends, and I literally came to the end of myself, and I was at an evening, Christmas Eve gathering of friends, a similar group of people we would gather every year and have a time of sharing, going around the circle, and you might share a highlight from your year or a blessing or a prayer request or what you're hoping for the coming year, whatever. And it's usually, you know, real meaningful time, meaningful sharing. And so at that time I had just completed a successful Kickstarter campaign God had provided, so it was a big praise. So that was my big highlight, praise to share. When the circle came around to me, I was just amazed and so grateful and so humbled once again. And then as I shared the praise, I said, I just need to figure out how to rest. I said that sentence but could hardly even complete it before bursting into tears. And I didn't even realize what was happening, you know, but God revealed to me through that and another devotional where again I broke down. God was putting me in touch with my desperate need for rest, and so I launched that. I just began to study that, what the Bible teaches about Sabbath rest, and it's not just this, you know, this commandment. You know, we kind of gloss over it, but in fact, it's for our own good. And He's taught me a lot in that. And but Be My Sabbath is that just guttural cry. You know, Lord, I have nothing. You know, I am so dead inside, and would you be my source and Sabbath once more? And so I've been able to speak at some women's events, even out of that, teaching on the importance of rest. And you know, we don't think of it, breaking the Sabbath, as any big deal, but I pretty much found out that it was, in fact, a big deal. And God, though, gradually restored my heart. You know, I just claimed the scriptures, you know, that say, Lord, you say in your word that you will renew our strength, you know, so I held him to it, but I had to do my part, you know, in guarding my rest.
Yeah, and it makes me think of something I read in Jesus Calling about how God gives us 24-hour days, and to just, you know, take things one day at a time and to not think about tomorrow. Would you mind telling us the story behind how the Lord brought you and your new husband together?
Sure, yes. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
So, yes, you know, he's doing a new thing, and I'm newly married, which sounds weird to say at this age, but he is the God of a second chance, and he does redeem the past, and he is able to restore. And so I met my husband through, after my divorce. I was sort of the covering for our daughter as she went through her college years. And so she and I were roommates, as she went to college close to home and lived at home. But so the couple that I began renting a house from near her college, they had a friend that they would send over periodically to fix things around the house. And so this was my husband, Stephen. So, and who later became, and never, wasn't thinking a thing of it. He'd come over just periodically, fix this or replace that or whatever, and we would have conversation each time he would come, and I, appreciated our connection and how he would listen to me, and how, it seemed as though what I had to say mattered to him,
Oh, yeah.
And we, shared about our journeys and our faith and our stories and our families, all of that. And so we dated for a good number of years before we actually got married. And so we're newly just embarking on our journey together as man and wife, and it's been really good. I had invested so much in my first marriage, as you do, and it's hard to even imagine loving someone else, and that in itself was a journey of discovery to see that, wow, in fact, God could open my heart in that way to someone else, and he could enable me to let go of my ex,
Yeah.
And so though it was very, very hard and very painful, I knew that God could handle my ex, and that I could entrust him to God. So that helped me,
Yeah, it sounds like it was really God orchestrated, and you always know when that's the case.
Yes, yeah, and both of us were very prayerful, in this relationship. I was very, how do you ever just sometimes pray? I don't know. Sometimes I do pray with my palms open, just as a physical posture of surrender to the Lord. So, throughout our dating time, I was very hands open before the Lord. Lord, we only want your will here. And I had learned such contentedness with the Lord as a single person, and I really, truly, in my strongest times with the Lord, was completely okay with never being married again, And if that's, I was like, Lord, however you can use me best,
Yeah.
If it's to remain single, if you would bring an earth husband, because see, Jesus had become my heavenly husband, and he had been a good, faithful, and true husband, and also a provider.
Yeah.
He'd been all the things you want a husband to be, and so I was fully in love, head over heels in love with Jesus. And so I would say often to Stephen, I would say, you're just the icing on the cake I'm already eating, because I, and I think that's a beautiful picture for people entering into a marriage. Are you content with the Lord, and work on your own wholeness. They talk about in divorce care, which I went to at my church, they talk about gaining custody of yourself, and it's just an interesting way to put it. And then as you enter into a marriage, you are a more whole version of yourself, a more healthy version of yourself, and hopefully the Lord is at the center,
What have been the pros and cons of being an independent artist in contrast to being under a major label?
Well, Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about, so when you're at a major label, there's departments of people
Yeah.
to do all this, to do a lot of stuff, to help with stuff, where, so you can be the artist, and go and do your shows and write and, do the things that are in your area of giftedness, because you have all this help. And as an independent artist, you're wearing more hats, and so you may be having to stretch and learn and grow in areas that, and that's what happened with me, to learn things that I hadn't done before, and to grow. I'm sort of technically challenged, but to push myself, and, if I was stuck on something, just to ask someone for help, and, But the good thing is I kind of have my hand in all facets of the thing, and I really wrestle with that because my heart sometimes just longs to write. That's my passion. That's what I'm about,
Yeah.
But I'm busy doing this administrative stuff and answering emails and da-da-da. And I really struggle with that, but I wrote another blog. It's called Right Brain, Left Brain Mashup, where I basically, come to peace with, there's a verse that talks about how we worship him, to love God with all our mind, our heart, and our soul. And just the whole right brain, left brain thing. Some of us we have the creative side, but not the other. And I'm having to do the other and discouraged by that sometimes. But in fact, it's okay for me to love him with all of my mind, left brain and right brain. To reframe it that way really helps me. It's like, you know what? Yes, I'd rather be over here. I'd rather be sitting at the piano 24/7, but that isn't my reality. And but it's okay. I can also worship him with these other elements that enable me to do ministry.
Yeah. And what's on the horizon for you in 2017 and beyond?
Yeah, thank you. Boy, I like what you said about the one day at a time thing, because that's a good way to live. But right now, as I'm newly married, I'm, adjusting to married life and enjoying supporting my husband. He's such a hard worker, and I've been learning about his industry, what he does, and delighting in serving him in any way that I can that's useful. But I also have been working on the side for a good few years, off and on when I have time, on a book, and I have quite a lot of content on a book. I've been writing blogs for years too.
Oh yeah,
and enjoy that as another means to communicate a message, or here's what God's showing me, without putting it into a song all the time. And so to compile a book that's kind of the stories behind the songs, the stories that only I can tell, but it also includes encouragement and some teaching and scripture and, just my journey. So I'm hoping to put that to bed soon, finish that up and navigate how I will release it. Would I self-publish? Would I, I'm not sure. I have to figure that out.
Okay, so in closing, is there anything else you'd like to share or talk about?
I'm trying to think. You're so kind to ask. So I do have a new batch of songs as well, and so I'm just not quite ready to press go on the next album, when and all of that. So I'm going to trust God to lead me in that, and I've been focusing a little bit more on the book writing thing, and working on bookings, because as an artist, as an independent artist, I've had different seasons where I've been with a booking agent, where I've had someone doing that, and other seasons where I've done it, and I have a lot of relationships, a lot of years of travel with people, and so working on that sort of thing. And I do more women's events these days where I may go in and speak and sing.
Yes, for the first time, I actually hired a publicist. For the first time, I've been doing this for about 10 years, the whole music ministry thing, and I've actually, for the first time, I kind of just came together, like it was God orchestrated. So hired a publicist and kind of going to see where that goes.
Yeah, I hope that's helpful to you.
Yeah.
And I've had some great publicists through the years, and it just helps get the word out, and maybe there'll be some media opportunities that come from that, TV and radio opportunities.
Yeah, and she's actually going to handle bookings too, which is something that I've always struggled with. So, yeah, I mean, I can write songs and perform, but the business side and booking and all of that, both my wife and I have felt kind of lost all along with all that. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, I so get it. I do so get it.
Yeah. So
music is a gift. So it's a beautiful tool that God has given us, and I hope to continue, for as long as He says, to continue in this manner. If He leads me in a different direction, I hope I'll have ears to hear it, and courage to be obedient with wherever it is He might be leading me. Right now, I've in the immediate have had a little season where I've been home, which has been kind of nice, especially in these early months as a newlywed and all of that, and time to focus on some other things before I do some gigs this fall.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. God bless you up there in Washington. I was there not too long ago up in, not too far from Bellingham, or there's another town up there. It is really beautiful up there. Well, thanks again for today, and God bless you in your continued endeavors.
No, God bless you too.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
Thank you so much.